This will make more sense later, you know. But
from inside out.
I never know where to start with these things. A lot of times because I can't remember where I started, or you know, where do we ever really start anyway. So anyway, let's start with the stogie, because that's not even really an insolent truth. That's just as I seek, as one part of me seeks truth, another part of me strives to stay the same. And I guess to kind of like do the wrong things, you know.
Excuse me.
And
what is the real issue here? The PTA doesn't matter. The PTA is here to acknowledge that pornography is being taught in our curriculum. It's meant to be ironic. Excuse me. You need to
try to do the right thing, and you try to put your best foot forward. Try to present yourself in a certain way, but don't always I mean, how do you present yourself authentically to yourself, you know, which is essentially these videos, I guess in some deep recess of my mind I imagine, like, well, maybe they'll be useful to somebody someday. Maybe they can become part of the conversation, or maybe at best they're just practice for becoming part of the conversation, so that one day I might converse in a way. Or maybe it's all, I mean, everything is connected. So in one sense, even if nothing is seen by anyone else, you know, everything we do engages in like that whole psychic connection and so on. And you know, I hate talking about it because I don't understand it, but it's out there. The idea of like quantum physics and action at a distance, and entanglement, you know, whether it's understood correctly or not. Obviously it's not, because I hate saying it, there's no unified theory known, and popularly known, you know. One would have to be intelligent enough, whatever intelligence means, to even understand it, if there was one. So, you know, the whole Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know, 42, I mean, maybe that's it, you know, and maybe that is it. Maybe redshift, maybe that's everything. I don't know. But, where to start? On this one being this little project that I've been doing for a while, and I made several posts on, and it was really, this particular project is a project born out of an earlier project with a new idea. And when I say new, I mean new to me. So for my 12-point circle stuff that I did, and I have a couple videos out there. My Diddy drawing video, I guess, was the first one related to that. See if I can find that. You know, this video, which was a series of well, in this case, 19 drawings, which I truncated to 16, for the reason of, it's not hard to understand, but it's hard for me to explain. But this was an animation I made just trying to study the 12-point circle, which is, let's see here. This is the 12-point circle, and there's a lot of videos out there that would explain it more succinctly and better than I can. And a lot of them are mostly on the 9-point circle, and the 12-point circle just includes another 3 points, which are the exospheres to the inner sphere on the triangle. Circles, which I guess could also be considered diameters. But these circles, I made some mistakes with my drawings. Like this is one. This is one, and this is one, and that's the other 3 points of a 9-point circle. And I don't even know what it is, but I've been struggling with it, and if I wasn't so opaque, I would have figured it out already, or if I wasn't trying so hard to make videos, and spent more time trying to understand, then maybe I'd have it figured out by now. But I think, it is all part of the truth. And I think there was a good line in that Ramanujan movie, whether or not it's authentic to the real person. I think it's a good quote anyway, where like the whole idea of math or trying to figure things out, like some people are trying to figure out, I don't know why people try to figure out the real thing, or try to figure out real things, or try to figure out, like, perfection, or like why things happen the way they happen. To emulate God, or to emulate themselves, or to understand, simply to understand, make an order out of everything. But yeah, there was some good quote, something about like how that Ramanujan dude wasn't interested in any math that didn't somehow speak to a thought of God, and I guess that's what this is all about. But anyway, this was my first 12-point circle animation, and then it's this triangle, just this triangle, that I've used in considering the second project, which is what this video is really about, though it's just worth noting that it's related back to this 12-point circle. And I made some notes on one of my other Marjery videos yesterday about how they connect, and hopefully I can tie some of that together without getting too lost in the weeds. But that seems to be my forte, getting lost in the weeds. There's some good PJ O'Rourke line about how so much of life seems, about getting, sorry for getting off the point, but so much of life seems to be off the point. Depends what we mean by a point. Anyway, so that's that. And this other video I'm working on, if I can find it, has more to do with just that triangle moving back and forth. And because I made the animation originally, because it was easy to do it in that way, I separated this line, all these lines, into 16 points, you know, and I basically just moved this point back and forth. I moved it 19, but I truncated it to 16, but I just moved it back and forth along this, and then I, you know, mirrored it so that it could go this way also. And then in another animation, I then flipped it down here so that it could then go these ways, and then as one went one way and one went the other way, you know, I made it so that I overlapped the images so that they could go over each other and so on. But essentially what I did in this for the audio is that this is 16 inches, this is 16 inches, this is 16 inches. And then I made a bunch of slides. So yeah, 16 inches. Lambda, which is the wavelength, 16 inches. That symbol, essentially, I had to struggle to find took me hours to even find something on this particular photo program to something that approximates a lambda sign. And yeah, I can't remember which way lambda goes. I'm kind of dyslexic. 16 inches, 16 inches, 16 inches, 16 inches. Why is the quote sign mean inches? Interesting question. Lambda 7. Lambda, lambda, lambda. LLL 777. Lambda, lambda, lambda. Which of course is gratuitous Revenge of the Nerds reference. Right, so 844 hertz with a wavelength, an audio wavelength, sound wavelength, and sound waves are so dependent upon so many factors that there are factors in which exactly, quote unquote, you know, up to a certain decimal place, exactly 844 hertz is a legitimate measure of a 16-inch wavelength. But there are, I mean, it could waver drastically depending on, you know, the density of the air, the exact components of the air pressure, and that's even if wavelengths are constant. I mean, you need a constant medium, and where do you find that besides a laboratory? If even there, you know, it's just more constant. But like in life, with the wind and the air, and, you know, closer to the ground, closer to the trees, closer to a house, closer to this or that, I mean, plus all the swirling of air and so on, different gases, and the respiration of people, animals, insects, trees, like everything affects all the ways that essentially the wavelengths of sound lens through the medium. So I guess 844 is as good as any other. And this is when I was using a foot as a wavelength, and I have another video where I talk about using light feet, which seems to correspond more closely to some sort of universal harmonic, but I'm just going to go with this one for now. And as time goes on, and if I make more videos, I think I'm going to correspond to my quote-unquote 1 unit being a light foot unit versus being a foot unit or a meter unit. Yeah, cycles per second, 844. Hz is hertz, is frequency. I was just trying to come up with some cool graphics. Cool to me. They might be super lame, but cool to me. I like this one. Now this is where I'm starting to try to figure out how to represent a function of what I'm doing with this triangle. So this triangle and the wavelength it represents as it moves back and forth creates these wavelength and hertz functional curves shy of this line and this line, which remain constant because as this point moves back and forth, this line remains a constant length. I didn't move it. I'm not saying that's the way things should be ideally, but that's just moving this back and forth. When I originally did the 12-point circle animation was the easiest way for me to create change within the 12-point circle so I could begin to visualize what's happening with it. It might have been a major mistake in that I'm moving the 12-point circle in the wrong way, but it did help me identify some of these relationships and how they're tied together and how, if in a still image you don't know what points really meet and what points remain in contact as the image moves versus which points don't, which means that they're not connected and that they exist in different planes or different that those lines are moving in different directions through dimensions, whereas the ones that meet are somehow describing a geometry. This was just me kind of like practicing and trying to figure out how I was going to depict these two sets of information together. This is a good one. In this line moving back and forth, I lined up with this line so that the way I separated this into 16 is the same way this is separated into 16. So when this top is lined up with these points, it's showing all the wavelengths and the hertz, all the essentially feet per second or meters per second and cycles per second in the same pictograph, along with the geometry of the triangle that is governing this function and the movement of this triangle as it's governing this set of functions. This was my original drawing. This is my symbol for wavelength. This is my symbol for cycles per second. That's why the C is above the S. Yeah, so this was just me doing point by point without a function. I did kind of narrow down a function. Maybe I'll get to that. But I'm struggling with that function because I'm struggling with it because I don't know if this is parabolic or not. I don't know. I mean, there's a curve to it, but when I try to work out the math, it's like I'm taking a square root. My y squared ends up equaling a parabolic equation. So I don't understand how when you take the square root of a parabolic equation, which would give me my y, I don't understand why that isn't just a straight line and why I'm getting a curve. But I'm not super good at math, but I try. And this is just trying to figure it out. I overlapped. This side is the wavelength. So this is a wavelength, this is a wavelength, this is a wavelength, and then this is the cycles per second, which is frequency, which is hertz, all the same thing. That's frequency, Let's see. Whoops, maybe I screwed up here. Let's see. Yeah, the cool colors are the wavelength. So wavelength, wavelength, wavelength. The cool colors, the green, blue, and purple are wavelength. And then the warm colors are the hertz. And that's what you're hearing. The wavelength is what you're seeing on the picture. Oh boy, this is already getting way too long. These were my calculations. Best I could do them. I was finding the wavelengths, which are all, I guess, rounded approximations. I did use a calculator, which is a major embarrassment, but it's the truth. Real mathematicians don't use calculators. I mean, I guess they calculate in their mind, but having that capacity is, you know, bigger. Never mind people who can just see. That's a whole nother topic. This was just one of the ways I was messing around with the original images, trying to figure out how all this stuff fits together. And this is essentially the marriage of my first and last frame, because they have the same wavelengths, even though in stereo it's a little this particular resolution kind of illuminates the dots of the 12-point circle. Again, this is kind of tying stuff together. I was just trying to figure out the best way to illuminate these, and a lot of my animations, this pink one, kind of disappears because of the degradation as I went from animation to animation. Because of I kind of have rudimentary programs, and when I say rudimentary, I mean rudimentary for what's available today, not, you know, it's still a miracle, quote-unquote, caveman, or what we think of caveman perspective. Yeah, this kind of just describes more where I'm at, and I think maybe now I'll just leave it at that, and try to pick up with just kind of let the animations go. This is already way longer than I wanted it to be, and I probably said less than I wanted to. Oh well. I never know where to start with these things.